Who's dealt with a control freak? Huh? All of us, right? Is it your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend? Is it a coworker, maybe your business partner or a boss? Man, control freaks can be overwhelming, can't they? We all experience them. We all struggle with them. And so I thought, I had a request quite a while back. Someone asked me, can you talk about control freaks? And so that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to tell you what causes a control freak? What makes somebody want to be such a heavy control freak? Maybe you're in a relationship like that. Why do they do that? And then why are we attracted to one? Like, especially in a relationship, why you may say you hate it, but yet you keep picking these control freaks, or even you have a business partner or a boss that was a total control freak. I'm seeing some of the comments here on the live broadcast, and people are saying, yes, that's my ex-husband. They were total control freaks. So we're gonna dive into that tonight. The first thing you have to recognize about a control freak is they are in massive pain, horrific pain. It's a scale. I mean, there's the moderate control freak, but let's say you've run into the, maybe even as far as the narcissistic type control freak. There's no gene for being a control freak. It's not something that they're born with. It's a learned behavior. It's one of the misconceptions about genetics, whether it comes to disease or anything like that, is genes get turned on by your environment. You may be born with the gene of cancer or something, but it doesn't necessarily mean you'll get cancer. That's like with addiction and alcoholism. They want to make it into this genetic disease. You may have that gene, but your environment is what will switch that gene on or off. So that's the first thing you have to recognize, is what created a control freak was horrific pain in childhood. That's where it all comes from. Okay. Most often, again, this is a sliding scale. They went through some type of sexual, physical, spiritual, or emotional abuse, like direct abuse, the abuse we think of. The more severe it is, the higher likelihood that they went through, those typical abuses we think of. Unfortunately, most people don't realize, very controlling parents who yell and scream when we don't do what we want, when we don't do what they want, what most people consider normal parenting. Because we don't teach anything about parenting, most of us don't know that we've all suffered abuse in childhood, and we all pass that abuse on to our kids. This is such an area, no one in this field really wants to talk about it, because, there's such a sanctity around being a parent. But until we address this issue, I mean, politics, everything is predicated on, our environment in childhood. The studies are overwhelming. Those first 3 to 5 years, you become your parents. It's basically it. Your illness, disease, career, everything you'll pick the rest of your life is determined by the environment as a child. And until we address these topics, nothing will ever change. You can argue about the border and all these different things, but it all stems back to parenting and the pain we've all experienced. So what people don't realize is, you could have a mother or father who was horrifically sick, and you were forced to take care of them. If there was a divorce and mom or dad opened up to you, they made you kind of a surrogate spouse and told you all the gory details and how bad the ex was, what a jerk they are, how they don't send money or whatever it may be, how they're an addict, all these things. That's child abuse. A lot of people don't realize that oversharing of information and making our child responsible for us emotionally. We do that because our parents did it to us. This is such a difficult topic to bring up because it sounds like I'm blaming everybody. But yet in a way, none of us are to blame because we've never been taught any of this stuff. So if you feel like I'm blaming you, that's a good sign. That means you're not a narcissist. That means you can accept that you're imperfect. The question becomes, do you want to go do something about it? And that's the tougher step. That's, societally, that's the biggest hurdle, is most people don't want to address this stuff. But so a control freak, they were consumed as a child. They basically had a choice. Well, actually, they didn't have a choice. That's the problem. They had to either willingly or forcibly give up who they are. Think about it. In sexual abuse, direct emotional abuse, spiritual abuse, all the typical abuses we think of, you lost complete control. It was taken from you. That's why, that you tend to see the narcissistic or more severe control freaks. It's almost always correlates with direct abuse, the type of abuse we think of. As we move, more towards the middle of that scale, away from the severe control freak, you'll find less instances of those typical traumatic abuses. But what you will always find is a parent or parents who were highly controlling themselves. And that can be done in many ways. You see this a lot with women. Women, I don't mean to pick on you, but this tends to be their role. A mother who is incredibly afraid of anything bad happening to their child. They live in constant fear. That's a control mechanism. So they don't let the child explore. They don't let them try things. They want to keep them close. Don't play outside. Don't do that. Oh my God, where are you going? What's going to happen? Who's going to be at the high school party? I need to talk to the parents. That massive stress and fear that the mother has gets, all of that pain gets transferred into the child. Well, they feel suffocated, and that's what will create a control freak. Fathers do this as well. Primarily women do. It's kind of bred into the culture that, most men would call it the hypochondriac type of woman, who's constantly afraid of everything, constantly trying to control everything, constantly worried that something is going to happen. They see the worst of anything. They're the type that are, the second they stub their toe or something's off, they're online Googling, and then they're telling their partner, oh my God, I have this disease. And, they're massive hypochondriacs. People don't realize that's a form of covert emotional abuse. We don't even know. Most women, this is a subconscious thing. They don't even know they're being abusive. And that's what was done to them in childhood. So they're just doing the same thing. Perfectionist parents. You'll see this shows up, will tend to show up more with men, like your kid who's an athlete. And the father's just never happy. I mean, you score 4 goals and they go, what happened on that 5th one where you hit the post? Why'd you do that? They're that, the soccer parent who gets in the fight, or the baseball parent who's screaming and yelling at the umpire, that kind of stuff. They're highly insecure because of their own trauma history that hasn't been addressed. And that's unfortunately what we all do as parents, because for centuries, we've had this cloak around parenting where we just don't challenge our parents. We don't look at their imperfections. It's even a societal bias of, you just, like I say in all my shows, over 80% of people think their childhood was perfect. That's absolutely impossible. Nobody's had a perfect childhood. Nobody's had a really good childhood. I don't care what you said. It's denial. It's a defense mechanism. Think of it. Everything else in your life, you can pick apart the imperfections quickly and easily. And especially at work, maybe you've had a career for 20 years, or you watch an athlete, Tom Brady, you can pick him apart in 2 seconds. Here's somebody who's trained since they were a child. They have all these coaches and mentors that make it, Tom Brady might be the best football player that ever lived, and he screws up nonstop. Yet you somehow had a perfect childhood with parents who've never had a coach or mentor and been taught anything. That's the fallacy we have around parenting. And so while I'm not trying to disparage you or your parents, I'm trying to bring reality into this discussion, Because if your life isn't working personally or professionally, it's your childhood. It's nothing else. It starts there. So if you're looking, you're going to seminars on all these different things, for the most part, you're wasting your money. Until you address your childhood stuff, you're just not it's like there's a traffic jam, and instead of reworking traffic patterns, you're going to get inside your car engine and change the oil. Like, why would you do that? It has nothing to do with the problem. And, that's so often what we do in our culture. So another way this perfectionist type of thing shows up is, you hear this all the time: happy wife, happy life. Well, that's an abusive statement. Think of the power and control that places at a woman's feet. Think of how emasculating that is to a man, that I have to give away whoever I am. So a boy or girl can grow up watching this dynamic where, this man has taken on, and the woman, maybe she's probably in this power dynamic of, it's my way. I was watching a podcast the other day. It was 4 women, and they were complaining about men, and they were talking about control freak stuff. And the women are like, well, the men just don't know how to do it right. So I just have to take over. Well, that's a perfect example of 4 women who had horrific childhoods, and they can't withstand what they're experiencing as their own childhood frustration and pain that was passed into them, that if they didn't do it right, they were going to get in trouble as a child. So now they're doing it to their husbands or boyfriends. I think most of them were married, but some had boyfriends. And, so that whole mantra of happy wife, happy life, if that's how you're living in your circle, male or female, and you have kids, you are sending them, you can be creating either a control freak or someone who will have no ability to protect themselves against a control freak. Now, here's what you have to realize. Here's why this is so important. And if you're thinking, wait, it can't be childhood, Kenny, you're on crack. It's something else. Well, think of it. Our sole need in childhood is attachment. We are the only species on this planet that will die without attachment. You can feed us, you can give us water, but if we don't attach to another human being, we literally die. We're the only species where that happens. The other thing is, we are the most underdeveloped species on the planet. Like, a horse comes out and can immediately run. Its head is virtually full size. Ours is like 13% of what will be. So there's this massive need in childhood to attach and learn from our parents. Well, look at what a child has to do. Their survival depends on that attachment. And so because we don't teach anything about parenting, and our parents are just transferring down the trauma and pain that their parents went to, and now we have a power dynamic. They never had power as a child. So now they exercise it over the child by correcting their behavior. They're going to get them to do exactly what their mom and dad did. And you hear most parents go, well, it's what happened to me. Whether it's spanking or whatever, they justify it. They end up, because think of it, as a child, I have to somehow, especially in the cases of severe abuse, sexual abuse, like I said earlier, the types we all know of, I somehow have to orient to that this is okay, because I won't survive without attachment. That's why over 80% of the population is in denial about their childhood, because it's a survival instinct to attach to their parents. Even if they're 60 years old, they're still stuck in that loyalty bind of, if I let go of attachment, I'm alone in the world. All right. And so what happens is, this child is forced to let go of their authenticity, who they really are, because that's our second drive as humans, is to pursue our own individuality, our own expression of who we are. So that's what's getting sacrificed by all of us. Every single one of us has been stuck in this loyalty bind. Nobody outruns it. Nobody's immune from it. That's why I say most people have no clue who they are because they sacrificed authenticity for attachment. They think this is who they are, but all they did was they took on the beliefs, morals, and attitudes of their parents to keep attachment. Now, the trauma that creates, the inability to express ourselves, will show up in one of two ways. I'm breaking this down into the extremes: the massive control addict and the person who's attracted to the control freak, not addict. In some cases, it's an addiction. Um, but in that moment, they realize, wait a minute, like there's someone I know, and we were having a conversation, and her parents were so controlling. She went the opposite route. She fought them at every step of the way, refused to do anything they wanted. All the other kids were the golden child. She was the troublemaker and everything. So she's highly controlling because her parents were, so she went the opposite way. All right. She completely was like, she learned from control freaks and became them because kids become what was modeled. Well, her parents couldn't stand it. They couldn't control her. So they were reliving their childhood and their sense of ineptness just because they were so controlled. And that's why they, you know, hit heads so often. So if you have two control freaks butting heads, you just have two children who are massively abused fighting each other. And in this person, in her case, she was sexually abused by uncles. I mean, lots of typical abuse, and couldn't get people to hear her, you know, and all of that stuff. So that's what's creating this control freak, is massive, massive trauma. I say that so you have a sense of empathy. Someone earlier said, you know, they talked about their husband was a control freak. I'm not condoning the behavior, especially if it goes to the abuse side. All of it can be abusive, but I'm not condoning that. But I do want you to bring you into reality of what you're witnessing isn't even an adult. When you have these massive control freaks, you're not dealing with an adult. You're dealing with a maladaptive coping skill that they developed in childhood. They are stunted in growth emotionally because of the trauma they've been through. And so that's what I want you to realize. I tell you that to help buffer you, because especially if they're abusive, it's so destroying, but it can, in a sense, empower you to go, oh my God, this is actually a 6-year-old doing this to me. They're so broken. And so you don't feel as threatened by a 6-year-old child. You see them throwing a tantrum and you go, oh my God, poor thing. And so that's why I tell it to you, because that's the fact. They are stunted emotionally. They are reliving that trauma stage in childhood, and they're acting it out with you. Okay. Now, here's the other thing you have to realize is because of the lack of attachment, they're seeking dopamine. Okay. It's something something that motivates us, brings us pleasure. Okay. So with a lack of attachment, our cortisol levels spike in the brain. All right. That's the stress hormone. Fear. What you have with control freaks is people who are massively, massively afraid. Their whole childhood was pure fear because they had to give up authenticity for attachment. Okay. So they're firing that. So what happens, it's a soothing technique. When we gain mastery or control over something, it gives us a sense of peace. Now, this is a false dynamic. I mean, it's the same thing. The reason people do drugs, drink alcohol, overuse sex, all of this, they're just, if you use food, you use anything to an addictive level, most people don't even realize they're an addict. They're in denial about it. You're just seeking to soothe yourself because of the tremendous trauma you went through in childhood. You're trying to raise your dopamine levels, and that gives you a calming sense of I belong in this world. The problem with control addicts and control freaks and their pursuit of this, and this is the same with any freak or addict, you know, because really what we're talking about is a form of addiction, is it always backfires. It's a momentary dopamine hit that's always followed by what? Rejection. Think of it. A control freak, whether it's your boss, your spouse, your friend, at some point you push them away. Well, what's their greatest fear? What are they completely trying to avoid? They're trying to avoid the abandonment, the lack of attachment that they suffered in childhood. So again, they seek that dopamine. It doesn't work. It backfires. Now they get another shot of cortisol. They feel that insecurity. They feel that ineptness. And it's the worst day cycle that I talk about in my book. Everybody's caught in this cycle in some form of another or another. You may not be a control freak. There may be, plenty of other things you do, but literally everyone lives their life this way. They just don't know it because no one's talked about what I talk about. So a control freak is spending their life, all of their time, their thought, their emotions, their energy, their actions. They're trying to prevent bad things from happening. Okay. Now, the sign of a control freak, this is the thing to recognize, is someone who's controlling on whatever level, from very minor to severe. What they are showing you is how absolutely out of control they are inside themselves. That's the trauma response. Okay. They are screaming in pain. And this is literally anyone from, this is from, right on a continuum, from the mild control freaks all the way to the severe. It's just, how often they, we've all heard the stories of the husband or wife who checks your phone, asks you where you are. They're like, wait a minute, that took you 38 minutes. It should have taken you 25. What did you do with the extra 13 minutes? Where were you? What were you doing? Okay. What that tells you is how horrifically awful their childhood was. Okay. That was something I really struggled with. I mean, because of, the control of my father, the abandonment of my mother, I was that way. Like, I think back to my second wife, man, I was so over invested in her life, trying to make sure she wouldn't leave me, that again, you create that animosity, and so I was actually creating the distance I was trying to avoid. I wish I had known more about this back then. I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. So that quest for that dopamine hit to calm them down actually triggers more cortisol and actually pushes people away. And so you get into, for those of you who aren't familiar, you get into all the concepts I talk about in my book, Your Journey to Success. So if you're caught on that loop, my book is the answer for you. Pick up a copy on Amazon. And so you can see, again, especially for those of you who think you've been through no trauma, you're going to see, oh my God, I had no clue how traumatized I was as a child. So it'll really help you get into reality and start repairing that. Now let's look at the other side. What about the other half of the problem? The other half of the problem is the person who sought out the control freak. Okay. Now, see, they went through the same dilemma in childhood: attachment, authenticity. Okay. What they ended up doing, the person who's attracted, like earlier someone said, my ex-husband was a control freak. What that tells me is in childhood, they probably had very controlling parents. And what they learned to do was submit to it. They gave in. They gave themselves away. They sacrificed completely authenticity. Okay. They blunted all their needs and wants, all their morals and values. They gave up everything. Again, it's a continuum on how far out they went this way. But that's what happened to me. That's why I picked my first wife. Because I went through both sides of this dynamic in childhood. In my first wife, I literally, I had no clue who I was. None. My wife ran roughshod over me, screaming, yelling, controlling everything, the money, the business. I mean, I'm running the business. She's not even involved. yet I couldn't do anything without her approval. So that was because, the case of my father, I had to become whatever he wanted to keep him pleased. Now, in the case of my mother, it was the opposite. She over empowered me with her alcoholism. She would come to me and ask me for hugs. She tried to make me responsible for her sobriety. That gave me power. So that's why with my first wife, I basically married my father. My second wife, I married my mother. And so I was the controlling one. I was a lot like my first wife, very much so. And so everyone's like, how do I end up with all these people at work, whatever? This is why. And no one wants to look at their childhood. And I'm like, man, if you aren't looking at your childhood, if you're sick, hurt, relationship issues, business issues, if you're not looking in your childhood, you're not looking in the right place. That goes for anybody. I can sit with anyone in 2 seconds. I can show you even your words. When you tell me what's going on in your life, you will tell me the drama and trauma of your childhood, and you won't even be aware of it. And all I have to do is give you your words back and say, did you hear that? Tell me about your dad. I do this all the time. I'm like, so you were the favorite, right? And their eyes kind of go like, how'd you know? And I'm like, it's like so obvious when you hear all this and people describe what's going on in their life. So the person who gets attracted to the control freak, they were controlled as a child. That can be done in several ways. Like I said, you can have the domineering, controlling parent. You can have the dismissive parent, who's highly critical. There are many different ways that shows up, but you made the choice. See, everything in childhood, we're going through all this trauma, and we're all making individual choices of how to create a maladaptive, mal meaning it works against us, maladaptive coping skill to survive this trauma. And so we develop what I talk about in my book, false personas. We think I'm this person. I like soccer. I like ice cream. I like whatever. No, you don't. Most people, when they do this work, they realize most of their interests are completely different than anything they've ever pursued. They start to recognize, wait a minute, I did all of these things to survive, to try and create attachment with brothers, sisters, mother, father, grandparents, teachers, coaches, whatever, because we're constantly in search of that attachment. Parents, because we don't teach this, parents don't know how, when our child acts inappropriately, how to be there for them emotionally and let them express their emotions. Instead, they try and squash the behavior, which is authenticity, who they are, because that's all that's been done to them. Is if the behavior's wrong, I have to squash it. No, if the behavior is off, that's an indication of the emotional pain they're in. If you can't be present for their emotional pain, they will succumb. They'll succumb to either controlling or submitting, basically. There's many facets along that continuum, but that's what's happening. And so parents have never been taught. They've been taught to beat down behaviors, physically, verbally, with their eye rolls, whatever it is, instead of being taught, when your child is acting out, when they're expressing themselves emotionally, they're trying to tell you a story of what's going on inside of them. When they're breaking the rules, they're letting you know what their pain is, but parents haven't been taught about this, so they try and squash the behavior. I was watching this thing last night on the new vaping cigarettes and how the addiction rate in teens has exploded in the last couple of years. It was fascinating to me. There's absolutely no investigation of these kids' childhoods. They got these two young kids on, and this one girl was talking about how her mother became aware of what vaping is and started to get massively controlling, tearing the room apart, and the child lost her trust. Well, the mother's The mother was completely oblivious to this child's life. What she described was a mother who was completely detached emotionally from her daughter. All right, when they talked about the childhood. So why did her daughter turn to vaping? Well, what do cigarettes do? It's a dopamine hit. Mom wasn't there emotionally for her daughter. So her daughter's looking for attachment, for that feeling. That's what attachment gives us. It gives us a dopamine hit. All right. It soothes us, it calms us, it makes us right in the world. So then what did the mother do when she started to see this behavior? She doubled down, threatened. I mean, it was horrific. Now this mother and daughter have absolutely no relationship. They're at each other's throats, and the daughter feels responsible for it. That's what was heartbreaking. The daughter's sitting there. She's 16, 17 years old, and she's completely condemning herself for how she lost her mother's trust. She's taken on responsibility for her mother's pain and her mother's inability to connect with her and do what's called attunement and be there. She didn't even recognize that her daughter was an addict. Think of that. She had no clue that her daughter was an addict. That is a mother who is completely detached from her child. That's why her daughter is taken to e-cigarettes. And now her daughter is carrying on the mantle of that abuse. It's my fault. I'm the bad kid. I have bad behaviors. That's what's so criminal about this. If your kids are acting out, if they're getting in trouble, I'm sorry, but all they are doing is showing you the trauma you haven't addressed. That's it. They're screaming back at you. You're trying to address the behavior. You need to be addressing the emotions, and you need, more than anything, you need to address the emotions inside of you from your own childhood that you've never dealt with. That's created this attachment authenticity gap. There's a lack of attunement. And I want to explain what attunement is. Parents make the mistake. They think that when kids are born, we all have that overwhelming sense of just pure love and joy for them. We think our kids get that. They don't. Attunement is the ability, especially like when a child is upset, to just sit there and not be affected emotionally, to let them express themselves and be okay. How often are you able to do that? Or do you start getting stressed and go, stop it? Stop it. Because what happens? Your childhood gets triggered. You hear your mom or dad's voice going, stop it, boys don't cry. Come on, have a stiff upper lip, or whatever it was you went through. The ability to attune to our children is the ability to be present emotionally. Our kids have absolutely no emotional barriers. Parents think if we don't, we go through a divorce, and I hear this all the time. I'm just not showing my kids how upset I am. They feel it. You don't have to tell them. They feel your anger, your resentment, your pain, your worry, all of it. Studies show at mothers who stressed in pregnancy, you've created an ADD, ADHD, bipolar, all of these new diseases that are showing up in children. It's not a genetic defect. It's not a disease. It's the result of we've forced women. I don't know if it's forced, some by choice, but the way society is now, it almost takes two incomes to survive. Women are so overstressed, so are men. I don't want to make this gender biased. Both parents are so overstressed by the demands of society. And studies show just in pregnancy, if you're a mother in high stress, you have completely altered the brain structure of your child right there before they're even born. Harvard studies prove it. Pediatric Association shows that you create your child by your emotional condition during pregnancy and in those first 3 years of life. So if you have a child that's struggling, you're struggling. Start with you first. That's the first thing you need to do. So, what's the recovery work? How do you overcome this? Especially if you're the controlling one. The first thing you have to do is it can be very difficult for the controlling one because they're usually in high denial. Because the more controlling they get, the further they go out towards narcissism, and narcissists don't see any advantage to dealing with themselves because the trauma was so severe, they're completely detached. Hopefully, if that's you listening to this, you're not in that level of denial. Here's a book which I recommend to everybody. Whether you are the controller or you are attracted to controlling people, you must get this book. It's by a lady named Beverly Engel. It's Engel. And the name of the book is The Emotionally Abusive Relationship. What you're going to learn in there is parenting styles. You're going to be able to start to see, oh my God, all these normal things I went through in childhood, I had no idea the impact they had on me, how abusive they were, how inappropriate they were, and how to recover from them. Now, this isn't to beat up your parents, but the truth is you're not attached to your parents. You're not. You both are in maladaptive coping skills. There's a distance because neither one of you are in your authentic selves. That's why, people get afraid of doing this work because they're afraid they'll lose their attachment to their parents, but you don't even have real attachment. I was talking to someone, I think it was someone who had me on their podcast. This was a while back, and they went to a reunion, a birthday party for their father. They didn't want to do any of the things that they were being asked to do. And he was so filled with the resentment over doing all these things for his father's birthday party. And that's us. That's the perfect example. So he's doing this to create an attachment with his father, but he can't be attached because he hates him for all the stuff he's being made to do. Where's the attachment? Where's the authenticity? And so I understand your fear about addressing your parents' imperfections. But if you want true connection with your parents, the only way is to overcome. Because, see, if you're a control freak, you are in massive rage. Massive, horrific, stuffed rage. Until you let that out, until you address it, and rage is generally what causes cancer. Almost all autoimmune diseases are the result of the inability to say no and stuffed rage and hatred. That's clinically shown. So if you truly want to connect to your parents, if you truly want to repair things with your kids, regardless of what age they are, you need to start addressing these things. And that's a wonderful book for you to start getting an insight into, oh my God, I had no idea that these types of behaviors and attitudes in parenting were so destructive. So that's the first step. Get into reality. The next step is deep trauma work. Now, whether that's working with me or somebody else that is an expert in this stuff, you have to unpack that. That child inside of you must grieve. They must mourn the loss of themselves. They must feel that and work through that with someone who knows how to help you do that. It's the only way, because do you see what happened in childhood? They lost trust. Their trust was broken, especially those who were sexually abused, physically, the severe abuse side of things. Even on a lesser degree, the trust was broken. I could not depend on my parent because they had to control me. And so the only way to rebuild that trust is to rebuild trust in yourself, because what happens to a control freak is they don't trust you because they don't trust themselves. Because look at what their behaviors, their maladaptive coping skills got them in childhood. Nothing. They were still controlled. They were still hurt. They trusted this parent. They trusted this uncle, this aunt. They thought they were safe, only to find out they weren't. You have to do the deep trauma work to rebuild trust in yourself so that you can begin to let go of control and start trusting yourself first. And then you'll be able to trust others and not feel like you have to control them. In general, the only way a control freak will ever address these topics is they will have to run out of options. There's so many people that watch my shows and never buy my book, never come to a class, never do anything. They never do the work. And that's because they're still out there trying to use their maladaptive coping skills. They haven't run out of options. They're still in that childhood state of trying to find a solution that won't force them to look at these truths and face their denial. And so that's why I say in my book, if you're not ready to do the work, please, I'm begging you, accelerate how you control people. Accelerate your addictions. Accelerate, cheat more on your spouse. Drink more, do more CBD, do more pot, do more heroin, steal from your company, lie more. Please, 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 please go inflict more pain on yourself. It's the only way you will run out of options and you'll wake up and go, this doesn't work. It just doesn't work. If you're not ready to do it, like I said, I have thousands of people that watch all this stuff and they never do any of the work. They love watching, but they haven't committed to anything because they haven't run out of options. They're still using those maladaptive coping skills to avoid this deeper work. So I beg you, accelerate those maladaptive coping skills. That's what will get you into recovery. What about those that are attracted to controlling bosses or controlling partners? Well, that's deep codependence work. You had to give up yourself to try and please others. And that's what a codependent is. They derive their satisfaction, their dopamine hits, from giving themselves away and trying to please somebody else, trying to make them responsible. They let go of responsibility to survive. That was how they bridged that attachment gap. And so the best codependence information out there is not Melody Beattie. I know she's the most well-known, but frankly, her information is very, very lacking. Please, Pia Mellody, Piamellody. Move from Melody Beattie to Pia Mellody. Pia Mellody is so much better, so much more detailed, and gives you so many more tools to uncover it. Her book, Facing Codependence, every adult should have that in their house and should know it back and forth. We're all codependent in some fashion. Even a control freak is codependent. They're just codependent from the one-up position, whereas the submissive, the one being controlled, is codependent from the one-down position, okay? The other thing to remember for the one being controlled is don't take it personally. You're just a proxy for the controller. They're just using you to avoid their own pain and their own trust issues. But you won't be able to see that. You'll take it on because, see, as a child, you had to blame yourself. That was the maladaptive coping skill that you adapted. It's like I did with my mom, with my dad. I must be the bad kid. Dad's upset. I am always to blame. There's something wrong with me. My dad used me as a proxy because my dad was beat to death as a kid. And so my dad focused that pain on me. And so I became responsible, I thought, for all of his struggles and why he was so angry. And so you won't be able to see that until you do the codependence work. You get caught in this loyalty bind. Whenever you stand up for yourself, you'll feel guilty That's what it can still happen to me at times. You'll learn to start standing up for yourself, and then as soon as you do, somewhere in the next 24 hours, you'll go, oh my God, that was so wrong. And then you'll call and correct it. You'll go back on yourself. That's what that teaches you. And so you're always second guessing whether it was appropriate to stand up for yourself. I did a post on Instagram today about, feeling guilty. If you felt guilty, it's because you were abused in childhood. You were told there was something wrong with you being authentic. And that was the case with me. All right. This isn't easy for someone new in this process, but this is a great tool to learn, especially if you're the one who's being controlled. Don't ever explain or defend yourself. Ever. That's one of the first loving steps you can do for both them and for yourself. And the controller is incredibly great at manipulating you and trying to get you. They egg you on and push your buttons to get you to respond and get you to buy in to their control so they can blame you. You just stick to a mantra of, let me see if I can give you an example so it makes more sense. Let's go get Mexican food tonight. Yeah, I don't really want Mexican food, honey. Well, why? You're always, you do that every time. Whenever I pick Mexican food, you always say you don't want it. That may be true, but I don't want Mexican food. See, there you go again, being rude. See, they really try and egg you on. Don't bite. What most codependents and those being controlled, they go, no, that's not true. Remember, just last night, we went and got Chinese food. And on Thursday, we went and got Italian. You pick those places. They're all true. And that's what sucks you in, is you go to defend yourself. Don't. Please, stop defending yourself. That's part of the dynamic of the controller, is to get you. It's called negative control. It's all attention seeking. All right? Don't bite. Just stay with, yeah, that may be true, honey, but I'd like Mexican tonight. Does that work for you? God, you're just so rude. You don't even listen to me. I think that means you don't want Mexican food. Okay, I'll go get it myself. I hope you have a great night. I know, for those of you new into this, I'd be like, there is no way I could ever say that. But that's what you're going to work towards. All right? Again, I want to wrap up with, if you are being controlled, or if you are the controlling type, please remember, this person is in tremendous pain. They've suffered tremendous abuse. They're scared to death. Their trust was broken as a child. And they have no other coping skill because they've never been allowed to recover. They've never been allowed to mourn the pain they experienced. They've never been allowed to have rage. And so they're using that rage to control you. But it's unhealthy, as I said. It boomerangs back on them. But please have empathy for them. But the best empathy you can have for them is to go work on your codependence and why you're drawn to them. Don't play the game with them anymore. Okay? All right, I'm going to leave it at that for tonight. For those of you who are unaware of the greatness movement and how it works, I started this for a couple of reasons. The first reason is we're not taught any of this stuff. None of us know it. We aren't bad, but we don't teach any of this stuff. And we brush it under the rug. I want to change that. I want to make these types of discussions, because here's what I found. I Googled, about controlling boyfriends and everything. I want you to think about what I just told you about controlling. Here was the basic synopsis of articles in Psychology Today, all over the internet. Here's what they said. Read my tips to become a non-controlling boyfriend or girlfriend. This is what they told people to do. Don't give them grief when they want to go out with their friends. Encourage their time away from you. Leave the past in the past. Stop cyber stalking them and or checking their phone. Live a life outside of the relationship. Respect their choices. Tell them you're proud of them. And this is my favorite. Surrender to life. Gag me. That's the information you get out there. No wonder the whole world is struggling. You think of what I've just said through this whole podcast. You have a true understanding of control, where it comes from, why you choose it, why you're a controller, why you're drawn to it, all of it. That's the information that's out there. Nobody wants to talk about this stuff. That's why these problems are escalating. We're not dealing with the core issues. That's the first reason I started the Greatness Movement. We need the type of information I'm sharing with you, not this superficial bubblegum stuff that does nobody any good, okay? The second reason I started the Greatness Movement is that people are scared to death to talk about what I talk about, to confront childhood, to confront our pain. There's a bias and fear in society about all of this. I want to change that. I want to make what I talk about become the superficial bubblegum stuff. Wouldn't that be amazing? People would actually heal. If I became the dumbest person out there, like I had the worst information, the most superficial, I would love that. That's the goal of the Greatness Movement. Give people the real skills and tools and break down that societal fear and barrier around confronting all of this stuff. Now, if that sounds like something you want to be a part of, if you think that'll benefit you and those close to you, please share the show, whether it's on Facebook, YouTube, wherever it is. Please join the Greatness Movement. Just go to the website, www.thegreatnessmovement.com. I send out a newsletter every week. Be kept abreast of things. I'm always giving tips and more information for you to learn this information so you can grow as well. If you don't want to do any of those things, fine with me. I don't care what you do. If you have your own way of spreading this type of deep information and knowledge, spreading greatness, knock yourself out. That's why it's not named after me. Everybody has their own idea. I need your ideas to spread this information, to get people the real information, so we can truly change society, truly change the world, instead of this garbage surrender to life. Like, that's just heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking how much fear is in that statement. That's a person who, because of their own childhood, is scared to death to talk about the real issues and truly help you out. That's heartbreaking. My heart breaks for the people, the therapists and everything that wrote all of these things all across the internet. My heart breaks for them. They're scared to death to confront their own childhood history. Let's change that. All right, I'm going to end it there. I really appreciate you watching. Remember, whenever we judge or blame people, the only reason we judge or blame is because they're doing exactly what we do. We're seeing ourselves. We just haven't confronted it. We're not aware of it. We just don't have the skills, tools, and knowledge to understand, oh my God, I'm seeing in them, what I hate in them, what I judge in them, what I blame in them is actually me. Now, the flip side of that is when you see greatness in somebody, when you see that person you know who has it together, the only reason you can see that, because that's judgment also, is because you have the exact same thing in you. Now, if you can't walk in that, if you don't feel attached to that, let us help you find that. We all deserve that. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful night. Appreciate you tuning in. If there's ever a show topic you want me to talk about, please reach out. I'd love to do anything that would help you get the right information. Have a great night, everyone.
I can do anything. I can reach any goal.